Caroline Leavitt muttered, "Fuck you, nigga," under her breath. She didn't know her mic was on, but what Jasmine Crockett said in response left America in shock. The flyer went out on a Tuesday morning. Simple design. 2 faces side by side, one smiling, one smirking. Bold text at the top: race, education, spending, no filters. At the bottom, in smaller print, the line that set the tone before a word was ever spoken: unscripted, unedited, unapologetic. Caroline Leavitt versus Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The panel was scheduled for Thursday night, 7 p.m., streamed live on multiple platforms, hosted in a sleek studio just outside Alexandria. The network had done this before, pairing strong personalities, hoping for viral moments, knowing full well what tension could do in high definition. This one felt different. Karoline was coming in hot. Her press team leaked talking points 3 days early. Phrases like woke economics and race-based handouts were floated on friendly podcasts, just vague enough to keep plausible deniability, but pointed enough to rile up her base. Jasmine didn't take the bait. No pre-fight interviews, no Twitter threads, no passive-aggressive quote tweets, just a short post on Instagram. "See you Thursday. Let's talk solutions." Inside political circles, people were already whispering about the moderator, about the set, about how these 2 women weren't just opposite parties, they were opposite frequencies. One leaned in for attention, the other pulled back and made people listen anyway. The day before the broadcast, producers held their final prep call. One of them, new to the network, asked if security should be doubled, not because of violence, because of the heat, the emotional temperature, the unpredictability. There was laughter on the call, but no one said no. The seating was staged for symmetry, not comfort. 2 chairs, 1 table, neutral backdrop, 3 camera angles, and a control room full of people told to stay ready for a live cut to black, just in case. The moderator, a respected journalist from Chicago, had her own notes, but she also had a gut feeling. These weren't just 2 people debating policy. This was something else, something older. When the email invite hit inboxes on Capitol Hill, more staffers than usual clicked "attending." Not because they expected policy breakthroughs, but because they knew the mask always slips eventually, if the moment's real enough. And this moment, it was already humming before the lights even came on. From the moment the countdown hit one, the air changed, not dramatically, not visibly, but something about the quiet shifted. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from nerves. It comes from people waiting for a spark they already expect to catch fire. The moderator opened with a welcome, calm, polished, then introduced the guests. Caroline Leavitt, former White House Assistant Press Secretary, current political strategist, known for her sharp sound bites and unapologetic tone. Representative Jasmine Crockett, attorney, congresswoman, known for her directness, her control, and her refusal to flinch. They nodded, politely, barely. The first question was broad, about public trust in government. Karoline answered first. She didn't waste time. "I think the American people are tired of excuses," she said, her voice crisp, practiced. "We've thrown billions at problems and gotten nothing but chaos in return. It's time to stop rewarding failure." She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Her gaze was locked across the table. Jasmine didn't respond. She just listened, head tilted slightly, one eyebrow raised, pen in hand, unmoving. Karoline kept going. "This isn't about race. It's not about identity. It's about accountability. And I'm sorry, but when you make everything about who someone is instead of what they've done, you've already lost the plot." A beat passed, then another. Jasmine blinked once. Karoline smirked like she'd landed something. The moderator turned to Jasmine. "Congresswoman, your response?" Jasmine uncapped her pen, made one note on the page in front of her, then looked up. "I think the plot," she said evenly, "depends on who's writing it." No raise in volume, no bite in the tone, just a line that hovered in the air a second longer than expected. Karoline adjusted in her seat, crossed one leg, uncrossed it. The next question came, this time about school funding. Karoline answered again first, her voice faster now, sharper. She gestured more. Her eyes darted to the cameras. Jasmine didn't interrupt, not once. She let the words pile up, like receipts. Every pivot, every jab, every attempt to get under skin, it bounced off like static. Jasmine sat there, grounded, not disengaged, just deliberate. Because the thing about storms is, they look impressive, until they pass and leave nothing standing. And Jasmine? She wasn't here to perform. She was here to withstand. It started as a murmur, not from the panelists, from the viewers, quiet comments online, side chats and group texts, a feeling that something was off, something deeper than disagreement. Karoline kept talking, policy this, overspending that. A few nods to those communities and low-performing districts, words that sounded benign to the untrained ear, but to others, they landed differently. She said, those people twice, once while discussing standardized test scores, once while questioning the value of federal grants for urban schools. Neither phrase was overt, but both were calculated. Viewers noticed, especially the ones who had heard it before, not just in debates, but in office meetings, parent-teacher conferences, bank appointments, and courtroom hallways. The language of coded distance. Jasmine didn't flinch. She heard it. Everyone knew she did, but she didn't pounce. She didn't break stride. She let the words hang there, visible only to the people who'd been taught their meaning the hard way. Karoline leaned into it. She called certain programs handouts, referred to systemic inequities as convenient scapegoats. Every phrase wrapped in plausible deniability. Every sentence a tightrope walked between deniability and dog whistle. She was careful, but not careful enough. The comments section beneath the live stream started shifting. People time-stamped specific phrases. They replayed her tone, her pauses, her emphasis. The contrast between her clipped confidence and Jasmine's controlled stillness. She's not debating, one user wrote. She's posturing. Another posted, if you know, you know. Karoline didn't just want to win the argument. She wanted Jasmine to crack, to raise her voice, to roll her eyes, to look like the stereotype Karoline's base already believed she was. But Jasmine didn't give her that. She stayed steady, wrote one line in her notebook, and waited. Because sometimes the most powerful way to call out coded language is not to call it out at all, but to let the audience do it for you. And they were already listening more closely than Karoline realized. It happened 47 minutes in. The conversation had circled back, for the third time, to education reform. Karoline was mid-answer, her voice louder now, sharper around the edges, like she could sense the crowd slipping. The moderator tried to redirect. Jasmine hadn't spoken in 5 minutes. And then came the moment. Karoline shifted in her seat. The moderator's question was still echoing in the air, something about equity in school resources. Karoline exhaled hard, not into the mic, but close enough. And under her breath, just audible through the hot feed, she muttered, fucking ignorant. A pause. Then, barely louder, barely clearer, fuck you, nigga. The room didn't catch it at first, not in full, but the audio did. Some of the studio crew froze. A camera operator blinked hard. A producer in the control room looked up from the switchboard, jaw tight. Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink, didn't turn. But her pen stopped moving. The moderator hesitated, glanced toward Karoline, then back to Jasmine. It was subtle, but the silence after the mutter was louder than any policy answer could have been. The panel continued, technically. A question was asked, an answer was given, but the air had changed completely. Something electric had snapped, and in a control room upstairs, someone hit record on a backup feed, just in case. By the time the segment ended, the clip was already moving. A Twitter account with 12,000 followers posted it first. Did she really just say that? The caption was time-stamped. The clip slowed down, enhanced. Within 20 minutes, it was everywhere. Not edited, not remixed, just raw. The phrase wasn't shouted, it wasn't repeated, but it was unmistakable. Suddenly, Karoline's practiced confidence looked less like control and more like exposure. And Jasmine? She still hadn't said a word about it. She didn't need to, because when the mask slips like that, the silence afterward does all the talking. And America was listening. Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's heavy, thick enough to slow the air, loud enough to ring in your ears. That's what settled over the studio after Karoline spoke. Nobody moved. Not the moderator, who stared straight ahead like maybe she'd misheard it. Not the producers, who froze mid-instruction, waiting for a cue that wasn't coming. Not the panel tech, who instinctively reached for the audio board and then stopped, knowing there was no way to rewind a live moment. And not Jasmine. She sat still, completely, as if her body understood that anything, any twitch, blink, or breath too sharp, could be read, clipped, spun. So she did the opposite of what was expected. She blinked, once, slowly, then inhaled, like she was grounding herself in something no one else could see. And then, she did nothing. No outburst, no cutting reply, no walk-off. She simply sat there and let the moment sit, too. The moderator finally shifted in her seat. She tried to push forward, asking a new question, something about tax incentives. But her voice faltered just slightly, like she knew they were all pretending something hadn't just happened. Karoline answered the question, too quickly, too loudly. She kept talking about personal responsibility, about entitlement culture. But her tone had changed. It was no longer conviction. It was cover. Jasmine didn't look at her. She just picked up her pen again and started writing. One line, center of the page. No one saw what it said. In the back of the room, a camera assistant stood stiff, holding her headset like it was made of glass. She mouthed a single word to the stage manager beside her. Shit. Up in the control booth, someone had already time-stamped the feed. No one said it out loud, but everyone in that building felt the same thing. Something had just broken open, and it wasn't going back together. It took exactly 17 minutes, from the moment Karoline's words slipped into a hot mic to the second the first tweet hit the feed. A clipped video, no caption, just the timestamp, 47:32. The audio was faint, the mutter half swallowed, but clear enough. Fucking ignorant. Nasty little ghetto bitch. The words were slowed down, replayed, looped. Then they were captioned, bold white text over Karoline's mouth. A second edit added Jasmine's stillness beside it. By minute 20, it had 10,000 views. By minute 30, it was trending. By the hour mark, She Just Karoline Caught was the #2 topic in the country, only behind a celebrity breakup that, suddenly, no one cared about anymore. Karoline's comms team moved fast, too fast. First came the unclear audio defense, then a longer post. Some have misunderstood off-mic remarks taken out of context. Karoline has always stood against hate of any kind. But nobody was buying it. Clips from past interviews resurfaced. Podcasts where Karoline had used phrases like cultural decay and real Americans. Speeches where she leaned just close enough to the edge to be deniable. Not anymore. The phrase was now locked in, digital, time-stamped, echoing. Even people who didn't watch political panels were posting it. Imagine saying this and thinking the mic's off. Jasmine didn't even need to clap back. This was the clap back. She's done. In Slack threads, in dorm rooms, in group chats and break rooms, people weren't just outraged. They were watching closely. Karoline's team floated another excuse, a mishandled mic, a misheard phrase. Then came the pivot. This is a distraction from real issues. That made it worse. The internet doesn't forget, but more importantly, it doesn't forgive bad damage control. Meanwhile, Jasmine's account stayed silent. No quote tweet, no interview, no carefully worded statement. Just one retweet from a Texas school teacher. The real power, sitting still while the mask falls off by itself. By midnight, someone had synced the moment to a gospel track. By morning, it had hit 4 million views. And Karoline, she was trending, but not the way she planned. Reporters swarmed the sidewalk by 7 a.m. with cameras, boom mics, someone live streaming on a phone with cracked glass. Outside the studio's back entrance, they waited for Jasmine Crockett to speak. Just one sentence, a glance, a hint of response. But she didn't come out that way. She used the side door, no entourage, no sunglasses. Just her, coat collar turned up against the morning wind, walking like she had somewhere better to be than inside a media storm. By 8:15, news anchors were already speculating. She's playing the long game. She's stunned. She's plotting something. But Jasmine wasn't plotting. She was processing. Inside her car, the radio was off. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, texts, DMs, email alerts. Her chief of staff called twice. Her press secretary called 5 times. She picked up none of them. At 9 a.m., her office released a single statement. Congresswoman Crockett is aware of the comments made during last night's panel. She is not ready to respond yet. That was it. No pivot, no condemnation, no emotional plea. Just patience. Just space. The word yet did something strange to people. It pulled focus. It quieted the noise. It made the waiting feel intentional. Cable news filled the silence with loops, clip after clip of Karoline's muttered words. Analysts debated the intent. Body language experts weighed in on Jasmine's stillness. A panelist called it the calm before the reckoning. But Jasmine? She didn't show up anywhere. Not on air. Not online. The closest thing to commentary came from her personal Instagram account. A photo posted with no caption. Just the sky. Overcast, soft gray clouds rolling in above the Capitol dome. The comments flooded in. She's letting it breathe. This is the kind of silence that makes noise. She's not hiding. She's preparing. Some wanted fire. What they got was clarity wrapped in quiet. Because sometimes the most disruptive move you can make is not moving at all. Long before the panel, before the spotlight, before hashtags carried her name like a flag, Jasmine Crockett had heard versions of that phrase a dozen different ways. In courtrooms, when a judge raised an eyebrow too long after she introduced herself as counsel. In airports, when TSA pulled her aside, randomly, again. In the chamber, when colleagues complimented her passion, but not her points. The delivery changed. The message didn't. You're not really supposed to be here. The first time it stung, she was a law student. A visiting professor asked her, after class and in private, if she'd ever considered a career outside of litigation. She smiled politely, said nothing, then graduated top 5%. Another time, it was a donor dinner. Black tie, soft jazz, too much cologne. A party leader leaned close and said, "We could use more fire like yours. Just make sure it doesn't get too emotional." She sipped her wine, took a breath, filed it away. Later, during a subcommittee hearing on police accountability, a colleague interrupted her mid-sentence, then again and again. Finally, she stopped talking altogether, folded her hands, waited. When he finished his monologue, one that rephrased her original point, she looked up and said, "Thank you for the echo. Now, shall we move forward?" It made no headlines, but in the room, it landed. Because Jasmine had never needed to raise her voice to raise the stakes. She didn't come from money. She came from clarity, from long talks with her father in the back of a church basement, from watching her mother rewrite grocery budgets to make sure everyone ate, from being told, not asked, to speak proper when visitors came. She learned early how to turn anger into articulation, how to stay centered while the room spun itself into chaos. So when Karoline muttered what she did, Jasmine didn't rise to match it. She'd already seen what came after moments like that. The unraveling didn't need her help. It just needed time. And Jasmine knew how to wait. It wasn't announced with fanfare. No promo clips, no pre-interviews, just a quiet media advisory from Jasmine Crockett's office. Press availability at 10 a.m. Eastern. No advanced questions. No prepared statement. Reporters still packed the room. By 9:30, camera tripods were shoulder to shoulder. Boom mics hung like quiet weapons above the podium. Journalists whispered guesses about what she'd say, if she'd name Karoline, if she'd finally explode. But when Jasmine entered, the room adjusted. She wore navy. No makeup crew, no entourage, just her and a black leather folder. She approached the podium like someone who didn't need it. The room stilled. She opened the folder, looked down once, then closed it. "I was going to read something," she said softly, "but I don't think I need to." She exhaled. Not dramatically, just enough. What happened the other night? That wasn't new to me. No one interrupted. No one even shifted. I've been called worse. I've heard worse. Sometimes out loud, sometimes in coded language, sometimes in meetings where people smile with their mouths and say things that feel like paper cuts. She looked up. But this isn't about a word. It's about a window a window into how some people still view others, and how much they're willing to hide it until a mic reminds them they can't. She wasn't angry. She wasn't trembling. She was steady. What matters is not that it was said, she continued. What matters is that we treat it like it was heard, that we stop pretending silence is neutrality, that we stop mistaking not yelling for not hurting. Her voice didn't rise. It deepened. This isn't about me. I'm not the first woman to be called something in a room where she wasn't expected to speak back, and I won't be the last. She paused. But I will say this. I didn't come to Congress to fight people who want to drag us backward. I came to build something forward, and the only way to do that is to see things clearly, even the ugly parts. She stepped back from the mic. No questions, no closing line, just presence. And somehow, that was louder than anything she could have shouted. The clip was under 4 minutes, but by lunchtime, it had 2.8 million views. No edits, no background music, just a single camera, a steady frame, and Jasmine Crockett speaking like someone who didn't need to dominate the room to own it. People didn't share the video because it was viral. They shared it because it was still. Because in an age of noise, she didn't raise her voice and somehow made the world lean in anyway. It played on TVs in school cafeterias, in airport terminals, on phones passed hand to hand at work breaks, family dinners, waiting rooms. She wasn't furious. She was firm, and that made the words sharper. Cable networks ran the speech in full. No talking heads, no split screens. Just Jasmine, uninterrupted. One anchor on MSNBC teared up on live air. It's not just what she said, it's how she stood when she said it. On Twitter, someone captioned the clip. This is what dignity looks like in the middle of disrespect. On TikTok, a high school civics teacher played it for her class. A student whispered, "She didn't clap back. She lifted above it." Commentators tried to spin it, said she was leveraging the moment, playing chess. But even critics couldn't deny it hit something deeper. Because she didn't just respond to a slur, she revealed the structure behind it. And she did it without name-calling, without vengeance, without ever mentioning Karoline by name. Karoline's team issued another statement that afternoon. Longer, smoother. It called for mutual understanding and elevated discourse. It went mostly ignored. Because Jasmine had already reframed the conversation. It wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about what gets revealed when someone shows control in the face of damage. On Instagram, a retired nurse in Baltimore posted, "We've waited years for someone to speak like this. No fire, no fury, just truth." On Reddit, a user wrote, "She didn't burn anything down. She held up a mirror and walked away." By the time evening fell, the speech had already passed 5 million views. And Jasmine, she was back at her office. Phone off, folder open, working. Because for her, the moment was never the point. The work was. It started with a phone call, then 3 more. By the end of the day, 5 of Karoline Leavitt's longtime donors had quietly pulled their support. No public statements, just polite emails from assistants. Schedules were suddenly full. Commitments were being reevaluated. She noticed the silence before anyone said it out loud. Inside her office, staffers were tense, eyes flicked between phones and screens. Her comms director, Seth, sat with a draft apology in his inbox, untouched, the one she refused to approve. "I'm not apologizing for a lie," Karoline muttered, but the lie was unraveling fast. That night, Politico published a scoop. An anonymous source inside Karoline's team confirmed the hot mic moment was real. No audio manipulation, no misinterpretation. Just caught. The quote was short, but lethal. "We told her the mic was live. She didn't care." It spread like a spark on dry grass. Podcasts picked it up. Late-night hosts did monologues. One even titled his segment, "How to End Your Career in 5 Syllables." Behind closed doors, campaign consultants started reassigning staff. Events were canceled. A cable news booking vanished. When her team called to ask why, the producer didn't mince words. "We don't platform implosions." Karoline tried to spin, released a new video, framed herself as the victim of cancel culture, said the moment had been weaponized. But even some of her allies were backing away. A conservative congressman from Utah released a vague statement about the need for civility. A PAC in Florida pulled its endorsement, pending further review. The language was soft. The message wasn't. In the span of 72 hours, Karoline had gone from rising firebrand to walking liability. And it wasn't just what she said. It was how clearly she'd been seen saying it. Meanwhile, Jasmine hadn't spoken again. She didn't need to. Because when one person burns the house down trying to deny the smoke, it doesn't take long before everyone else notices the flames. The tide didn't crash. It turned, quietly, steadily, like a river that had already changed direction long before anyone realized they were drifting. People weren't just turning away from Karoline, they were turning toward Jasmine, not with fanfare, with recognition. Because in a week of spin, denial, and noise, Jasmine had become the symbol of something rare: grace under pressure, clarity without cruelty, strength that didn't require spectacle. It wasn't just her speech, it was everything after. She didn't gloat, she didn't tour the networks, she didn't capitalize on the moment like a brand. She went back to work. That hit harder than any viral line. Clips of her press conference circulated with new captions: the standard, leadership redefined. She didn't react, she responded. On the House floor, colleagues nodded to her in passing, who never had before. A few stopped to thank her. Some of them didn't even say why. They didn't need to. Her team inbox was flooded, not with press requests, but with stories. Emails from teachers, veterans, mothers, interns, not screaming, just sharing. "I've been her in that room," one read. "I didn't know how to name it. She did." Finally, someone didn't just survive it, they shifted the power. Political analysts updated their rankings. Jasmine Crockett was no longer a name to watch. She was the name people were watching. A CNN panelist put it simply, she didn't win a moment, she redefined one. Campaigns started citing her approach in strategy sessions. Young staffers printed her quote, "You don't have to shout to be heard, you just have to know what you're saying." Karoline's numbers tanked. Jasmine's didn't spike, they solidified. Because this wasn't a trend, it was a transition. The kind that happens not because someone went viral, but because they told the truth calmly and dared people to sit with it. The kind that lasts longer than any headline. The kind that marks a shift, not just in politics, but in what people were finally ready to call leadership. The PDF was 47 pages long, no color graphics, no clever branding, just a plain header: equity and access, a legislative framework for education reform, and Jasmine Crockett's name beneath it. It dropped on a Tuesday. No press conference, no teaser tweets, just an early morning email to the House Committee on Education, a few select journalists, and every state superintendent in the country. The message was clear before a single sentence was read. This was never just about a moment. It was about a system. The policy was dense, built from community input, state-level audits, and quiet meetings Jasmine had been holding for months. It outlined racial disparities in funding, access gaps in rural and urban districts, disproportionate disciplinary practices, and the bureaucratic chokeholds that kept under-resourced schools running in circles. It wasn't performative, it was structural. She didn't name Karoline, didn't reference the slur. The document never even mentioned the panel, but anyone reading it knew this was the answer. Not a rebuttal, a replacement. The executive summary was signed by 3 co-authors, 2 Republican colleagues, and 1 independent from Vermont. Quiet supporters who hadn't posted statements, but had stayed on the email thread. Their names gave the plan weight. By noon, The Atlantic called it the most comprehensive education proposal introduced this cycle. On Twitter, someone wrote, "While Karoline spiraled, Jasmine built a blueprint." By 3 p.m., 2 governors requested briefings. By evening, a coalition of civil rights lawyers posted a thread breaking the bill down line by line. It was solid, unshakable. And suddenly, Jasmine wasn't just the woman who'd kept her cool under fire. She was the one offering something tangible, something that could outlast a moment, a news cycle, or a smear campaign. Karoline had wanted to discredit her. What Jasmine delivered made that attempt irrelevant. Because while Karoline tried to win the clip, Jasmine wrote the plan. And the difference between the two? One disappears when the camera's cut. The other builds long after the lights are off. The meeting was scheduled for 4:30. It ran until 7:15. Inside a dim, wood-paneled room in a Capitol Hill townhouse, Karoline Leavitt sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, arms folded. Her senior advisor spoke first, then her pollster, then her media consultant. None of them sugarcoated it. You're underwater in every swing district. You lost independence. Hard. We need a reset now. A resignation was floated, quietly, hypothetically. Karoline didn't respond. She was staring at her phone. Jasmine's proposal was trending. Again. Across the city, Jasmine wasn't in a meeting with consultants. She was in a high school cafeteria in Baltimore. No podium, no press. Just a U-shaped circle of teachers, principals, and local organizers. They were reviewing her education bill together, page by page. "What would you cut if they won't fund it all?" one teacher asked. "I'd fight for the whole thing," Jasmine said. "But if we have to phase it, we start with equitable staffing and transportation. Because kids can't learn if they can't get to school or if there's no one there who sees them." No applause, just nods. Karoline's team discussed rebranding. "Focus on economic talking points," one strategist suggested. "Less culture war, more kitchen table." Someone proposed booking her on a redemption podcast. She waved it off. "I'm not crying on anyone's couch." But she was unraveling, not publicly, not loudly, quietly, because she hadn't just lost a moment, she'd lost control of the frame, and that was harder to reclaim than a headline. Jasmine didn't know what Karoline was doing that night. She didn't care. She was too busy scribbling margin notes from an assistant principal who said, "If you get this through, I'll finally be able to hire a second counselor." Back in the townhouse, Karoline's team argued over next steps. Across town, Jasmine listened. That was the difference. Karoline tried to rebrand. Jasmine kept building. And people were noticing. Not the kind who book panels, the kind who vote. This was never just about a hot mic. Not really. Not about a slur whispered too close to a live feed. Not even about the woman who said it, or the one who didn't flinch when she heard it. This was about something older, deeper. Who gets to speak without being questioned? Who gets to stay silent without being erased? Who's expected to take the hit and smile anyway, and who's allowed to walk away untouched, no matter how loud the damage? The panel was just the frame. What it revealed was a portrait that's been hanging in plain sight for decades. People thought the story was over when Jasmine didn't react. Then they thought it ended with her press conference, then with the bill. But the bigger story wasn't in any one moment. It was in the shift. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that settles. Quiet, permanent, cultural. Because this time, the country didn't rally around the most dramatic voice. It rallied around the calm one, the clear one. The voice that didn't rise to meet disrespect, but stood still long enough for the room to see where the real noise was coming from. And once you hear that kind of silence, the kind that holds its ground, waits for the truth to land, then walks forward like it never needed permission, you can't unhear it. Classrooms talked about it, boardrooms unpacked it, churches, libraries, community centers. Not because Jasmine made a moment, but because she refused to let one define her. She didn't just hold her ground, she changed what the ground looked like. And Karoline? She'll fade, slowly. Not erased, but outpaced. Because the story never needed a villain. It needed a mirror. And for once, the country didn't look away. It asked, who do we elevate? Who do we interrupt? Who do we excuse? Who do we expect to endure? And maybe the better question is, who do we become once we stop pretending we don't already know the answers? Jasmine never raised her voice. She didn't have to. She raised the bar. And maybe that's the real headline, one that won't trend, but will last. The future belongs to those who don't just survive the moment. They build after it. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.